This is the Mind Body Detox Podcast, where we discuss all things integrative health and wellness, interviewing folks from all over the world, sharing insights and wisdom for how to live a healthier life in mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back to the Mind Body Detox Podcast. I'm your host, Mind Body Medium Kara Lovehart, and today we're exploring the powerful healing practice that's taking the wellness world by storm, and that's trauma-informed yoga. So if you've been searching for holistic approaches to mental health, recovery from PTSD, or emotional healing, this episode's for you. We're going to be diving into how trauma-informed yoga works, why it's so effective, and why it's essential in today's fast-paced, high-stressed world. So we're also going to just explore the different types of yoga and why people practice them. That's one of the common questions that people ask me as a yoga instructor. What type of yoga should I do? So let's start by defining trauma-informed yoga. So what is trauma-informed? So trauma-informed yoga it's a specialized practice, and this adapts the traditional yoga postures and mindfulness techniques. So this is to meet the needs of you as an individual, maybe who have experienced trauma, and maybe even if you don't identify as that, if you have experienced high stress or chronic stress, because both of these things take the nervous system and put it in overdrive. It can be sometimes very hard for us to downregulate our nervous system, and we can be more sensitized to environmental stimuli, to fast-paced motions like we see in power yoga, or even just the environmental factors like loud music, or even in general, how the yoga is practiced. So we're looking for in trauma-informed yoga prioritizing safety and choice and body awareness, which is also known as interoception. So let's think about this. If you've experienced some sort of chronic stress or trauma, you've experienced whether real or just experienced, or your perceptual experience of having your power of choice being taken away. So in trauma-informed practices, whether this is a clinician that practices trauma-informed awareness or yoga, we're utilizing in our language as instructors, choice. So what it looks like in a practice is instead of, okay, downward dog, upward dog, now we're going to be moving into this breathwork practice. It's expressions like, I invite you to take a deep breath in with me. Expressions like, if you'd like to close your eyes down, or if that doesn't feel comfortable for you, you can just soften your gaze. Because sometimes if you are in high stress, high alert, maybe it doesn't feel safe for you to close your eyes down. And in this type of yoga class, you're going to be having the tools with the language your instructor's using to make the choices that are best for you. It's geared to help you get back in touch with your body and the awareness of your felt sense, which is that internal sense of how you're feeling. What does your body feel like? What do your emotions feel like? Where are you feeling them in your body? So this awareness and guiding through the classes will help you get in touch with your body and give you the power of choice. And again, this helps you feel more connected to your body, more in a space of empowerment, and it's really helpful for symptoms of reducing stress, even PTSD and anxiety. And of course, yoga in general is good for so many different things that we'll discuss here. Now, I think in this day and age, people are really learning about trauma-informed practices, and we ask, well, why would someone want to take a class like this? If you've experienced trauma or high stress, yoga classes can help you heal from the disconnection that trauma can cause, especially between the mind and the body. So through this mindful movement practices, breath work, and also this non-judgmental environment, that is really important that we have that in classes that are led by trauma-informed instructors. This can help you gain a sense of safety, a sense of control in your body. And again, this is very, very effective for managing symptoms of PTSD, anxiety, or depression. Now, I will take a space here, just a moment, just to share that in this episode, we are not diagnosing, we're not intending to treat any of these symptoms. That is something you'll work with your mainstream mental health professionals. But trauma-informed practices and body work in general, whether it's massage with a trauma-informed massage therapist, a somatic practice like somatic experiencing, or even yoga, if you are working with a counselor, it really pairs very well. So in general, we want to talk about if you are looking to take a trauma-informed yoga class, what should it look like? So in general, when you come into a yoga class, we want to look at how are they doing their intake. So that would look like in their intake form. It's going to ask you specific questions that you can be open and honest because it is something that's a private um, form that is going to be supporting just knowing what the instructor, sharing with the instructor what they need to know, that will give them an idea of, okay, maybe there's specific types of music. Maybe you've had a trauma during a thunderstorm. And sometimes in massage therapy sessions, and even maybe in yoga practices, there might be relaxing music that might incorporate that type of thing into the practice. So if the yoga instructor is informed ahead of time of excluding that from the practice, that is trauma-informed care. We also will look at, maybe you are someone that gets overheated easily, and that can be a trigger for you for your stress response. So you might be a person that they would say, hey, maybe hot yoga is not for you, and help discern better for you what might be good for your practice. One of the other things that we will see in a trauma-informed class in general is maybe how the marketing is done. So if you are going to a yoga studio or to a website, you can read the biographies of the instructors, and you can learn a little bit more about the studio, how it's set up, what's the etiquette for coming in, how soon to come in ahead of time, where the location of the room is, giving your nervous system preparation even before you come into the studio. That is very helpful for if you're experiencing high stress, to know what to expect. And especially when we're going into a new situation in a group environment, we can experience some stress just of that maybe social anxiety of meeting new people or knowing, what do I expect in this situation? What is expected of me? So that's something that's very helpful for a trauma-informed class. We will also want to make sure you're looking for teachers who are either asking permission in a way that's trauma-informed about physically adjusting students. So sometimes in yoga classes, the instructor will come and adjust your poses for you to get into the pose in a way that is more efficient for you, for your body type. In a trauma-informed class, the instructor usually at the beginning of class will ask the students to either soften their eyes or close their eyes if they feel comfortable, and ask them if they do not feel comfortable being touched in that practice to either raise their hand, or sometimes they can have a card that they'll have under your mat that you can pull out. And that way, if you are feeling uncomfortable with maybe socially that pressure of, I don't want anyone else to know that I don't want to be touched, maybe I should be, you can go through these whole things in our mind that make us think that maybe I should allow them to touch me. Maybe that's okay. And when we're learning to become sovereign and be able to find our own sense of our body safety, having the permission and being asked permission. And that's where you'll see a lot of language is different for trauma-informed yoga classes. There's a lot of asking permission, giving options, and allowing you to opt out of poses or modify them based on your comfort level. So that's something that we will definitely see in a trauma-informed class. One of the things I also ask in my class, to make sure that anyone who might have sensitivities to incense, to sage, to essential oils, these are common things that you might experience in a yoga studio that maybe that particular studio could not be aware of the trauma-informed practices, to ask ahead of time. Because smells, just like certain types of music, certain types of environmental temperature changes, there are other things that can trigger chronic stress or trauma responses in the body. And especially if you have a sensitivity to even a lovely oil such as lavender essential oil, that can be something that you can just be sensitive to it, and your nervous system isn't going to be able to enjoy that class. So these are things that would be very helpful to look for when you're looking for a trauma-informed yoga class. The other thing that I find that's really important when you're looking for a trauma-informed yoga instructor is to ensure that they're creating empowering and non-triggering environment through the language that they use. Using language that's sensitive to different backgrounds, culturally, different genders, different orientations, and definitely not sharing things that would be religious in nature or maybe political in nature. There are definitely traumas we've experienced specifically around maybe religious trauma or church hurt or things like that that can be a trigger for people, or obviously political things can be very triggering for people in our polarized culture. So I think that that kind of conversation, those types of topics should just be left out of the yoga room. So I think that in general, when I first took yoga, it was one of those things that for me, I was definitely a little insecure about coming to a yoga class. This is when I was 260 pounds. And I was, even now, like if I go into a yoga class now, I really do check out the studio ahead of time because of my own past experiences that weren't the most feeling safe for me. I want to make sure that the instructors and the environment seems like it will be something that will feel safe for me. And I know that in our culture today, we need a lot more tools, and especially this sense of self-empowerment and this permission from maybe a podcast like this, going the information about what trauma informed means, so that we can understand that that type of resource and option is out there, especially because, it's not just our individual traumas that we've been through, but the collective global pandemic that has caused a lot more of our nervous systems to be high, keyed up, and it's hard for us necessarily to slow down. And in order to help our nervous systems heal through the gift of yoga and breath work and meditation that yoga offers, we have this opportunity to slow down and rebuild that emotional resilience and heal from the inside out. And that's really what yoga is all about. Another thing that I find important to mention is there is this thing that if you've never been to a yoga class, and there are people that have experienced friends or family members that have gotten involved in yoga and gotten involved in the culture and the lifestyle of yoga. And because there is not necessarily a governing body that is going to make sure that each of the yoga cultures or little communities out there are practicing ethically and they're empowerment driven and they're not necessarily creating these cult-like environments that might be unhealthy. That's something that people are concerned about, especially if they've had friends that have gotten involved with some of these environments that could seem very cult-like. We have seen yoga practices in the yoga traditions, such as Bikram yoga, and even in the Kundalini yoga tradition, the tradition that I follow, where followers of these teachers have had experienced unfortunate misuse of power and this hierarchical, like non-inclusive environment where people are pressured to or coerced to practice a certain way, to practice certain lifestyle habits, and even moving into more of these spiritual religious-based practices that if you're getting involved in yoga and you have a teacher that you really look up to and you're not having the discernment yet, there is this sense of, I need to follow what this person is saying to the T. And especially in a culture, we don't have that sense of autonomy yet, knowing who we are, knowing what our body wants, what it doesn't want. And if we're looking for guidance, sometimes we can easily fall victim to following blindly. And that's not any of our fault. If we're trying to seek that out, we're in that space of trying to find empowerment. That sometimes happens along the way because we haven't learned discernment yet. So I feel like the misuse of power in yoga culture is something that I wanted to just brush on because it is a real thing. And if anyone out there has experienced any of that, my deepest, sorrow for you, and my compassion goes out to you, because one of the things that I hear often is, people say this all the time, and I don't know if it's just because of where I live in the country, but I've had people share with me that they have experienced that yoga's a cult. It is, and there's this fear around it. And it makes me sad because there is so much power to yoga. It is not a religion. It is something that can benefit anyone, no matter what their background or their spiritual or religious beliefs. And it's so powerful for the mind and the body. So I encourage you guys, if you've experienced any of that or heard anything like that this episode can educate you a little bit more about really what is something you should be experiencing in a class for your own maybe openness to experience yoga if you've never tried it before. So let's talk about what makes a safe yoga space. So The safe yoga space this is where students will feel empowered, and this is where you'll be able to choose your movements and modify poses if needed. And in a trauma-informed class, the instructors will create this environment by offering supportive guidance and avoiding the physical adjustments without permission, allowing you as a student to set your own boundaries. And this is usually creating a calming and non-judgmental atmosphere. So that's really important. At Firefly Hollow, what we do is we do our best to do some marketing and educate people about what our space looks like, what to expect when you come in. And so some of those things look like, here's our studio space. This is what each of the practices we offer include. This is what you can expect when you come in. We ask you to come in 15 minutes early so you can fill out paperwork. As I said before, in that paperwork, we give you a spot to just list some things that are maybe something that's stressful for you or things that we can know about. And that way we can really create a practice that includes you and your needs. We will also share, about cancellation policies. That's something that's pretty standard when you go to a business or a clinic that offers yoga. That's something that you can expect to see, especially when these yoga instructors are, of course, getting paid to work. And if someone's not showing up, it's something that it's stressful if you don't know ahead of time that you signed up for a yoga class and maybe you just thought, okay, I can't make it. And if you didn't show up, then you're getting charged a fee, right? Who loves getting fees, right? It's not fun. But if you know ahead of time that's what's expected of you, and as far as the professional protocols and procedures for that place of business, it's also really helpful to know that information. So I just want to also kind of segue here into talking about yoga beyond the physical practice. When I first got involved in yoga, I had this awareness that just intuitively that yoga was a very spiritual practice. And I didn't have the history or understand fully really what that meant. And so when I was going to a lot of these yoga classes, they were very much, as I learned later, very westernized versions of yoga and its practice. Because as you understand when you learn that yoga is more than just the physical postures, or we call them the asanas, it does incorporate breath. It incorporates meditation and even ethical principles that will promote your healing, that promote more deeper connection, mindfulness, and emotional balance. So I think that when I first got involved, it felt, because I was involved with power yoga, and we're going to talk about what the different types of yoga are, but power yoga is very fast paced. And as I learned later, I thought, this doesn't make any sense to me. I was like, yoga, from what I understand, is supposed to be relaxing. It's supposed to help you feel more connected to your body. And at that time, being someone that's gone through trauma and chronic stress, that type of movement and fast-paced motion was not only hard to keep up with when I didn't know the poses. I felt awkward. It felt more stressful for me. I felt I was comparing myself to others. And especially in that type of practice, as it was westernized, our culture is very competitive and comparing, and I got to be like them, and I have to do these inversion poses and things that I don't think my body can do right now. And there was then this sense of shame, like, I can't do this. And it wasn't until later that I understood that that is not actually what yoga was intended to be. It is beautiful that we have that aspect of yoga and that adaptation of the practice, because hot yoga, power yoga, some of these types of yoga are really beneficial. So if you sit at a desk all day and you're in a space of just sitting, movement can be very, very helpful. If you're someone like myself that is a entrepreneur, I juggle a lot of tasks and wear many hats. It is something that, for my nervous system, a fast-paced, high stress or high cardio type of class isn't what my nervous system needs for creating balance. Creating balance is more of a restorative practice, a practice that maybe invigorates my nervous system instead of stresses it out. So in general, we have lots of different types of yoga, and I'm going to talk about them. But in general, I think that we only really view yoga as a form of exercise. And it's not until you maybe get involved with a practice and do it consistently that you'll experience the benefits. Now, we'll think about yoga as, I want to get more flexible. That's common. We can associate that. but also increasing your strength. That helps your muscles, it helps with our flexibility, and then just the muscle strength in general. Reducing stress and anxiety is something that I only experience through a continual practice, and even just some of the yin yoga practices that I took. The breath work, the meditation, those do help activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's that rest and digest state that our nervous systems in our culture sometimes have a hard time activating. So it can really help calm the mind. Another thing is if you're someone that experiences brain fog and have a hard time focusing, when our nervous system is keyed up and we are on high alert, our nervous system has evolved to, when we're in that state of awareness, to be scanning our environment for things coming at us, to be on high alert. Our peripheral vision is more keyed up so we can see things, and we get easily distracted by noises in our environment or people walking by. And this is why I think some of us may be experiencing more focus issues. The extreme would be like ADHD. There's a lot of other factors that affect that. But mental clarity and focus can happen when you start to learn how to downregulate your nervous system. There's a lot of ways to do this, just like body work and massage and Reiki. But yoga, through this self-empowered sense of, I know that I can take a breath now through this practice. I know I can do this mindfulness exercise or this meditation practice that I learned. But that present moment body awareness that we can have, that can help us to learn how to get better focus through downregulation of the nervous system. Now, if you're doing more cardio-based practices, of course, we can increase our cardiovascular health, and this can, of course, reduce the risk of cardiovascular diseases. So me being a tall person, I was always the tall one in my group growing up. And I had this sort of posture of hunching over to get down with my friends. And I still am a little bit taller than most of my friends. And so posture is something that is a practice. If you are someone that's really trying to improve your posture ever, you've recognized that it's something that's a habit and takes some time. But if you're using the different types of yoga practices, you're going to start to align your spine and improve your posture because you're strengthening the muscles that naturally start to bring you more into balance structurally. So that's something that's really beautiful. Specifically types of yoga like Iyengar yoga. We're going to talk more about that. And I think if you are experiencing like back pain or anything with body pain, hip pain, neck pain, any type of pain, you're going to be able to potentially improve that if it's something that's a structural or a muscular imbalance. That's the root cause of that. If you are someone that does really struggle with emotions and emotional balance, in general, when we are working with regulating our nervous system and stress response, we can help our hormones balance. This can be including our blood sugar and even our other hormones. So I really encourage those who are looking to add other natural options for balancing their emotions or dealing with emotional stress or trauma, yoga as a really great practice. One of the things I like to hear from all my yoga students is enhancing the quality of sleep. So practices like yoga nidra, restorative yoga, and any other restorative practice can help with your sleep. But Kundalini, surprisingly, also can help with the sleep. Kundalini yoga also can help with the sleep. And I find this is because we are discharging excess stress from the nervous system through those practices. So my favorite part of yoga in general is enhanced body awareness. We are a culture that really has a hard time being aware of our bodies. So when you are doing a lot of things, you're on your cell phone, you're calling people, you're driving, how often are you aware of your body? It's not until we have some sort of physical pain, a lot of times, that we start to notice something in our body. And not only the physical aspect, but also emotionally, noticing the body and how we have this felt sense of where we're feeling maybe stress, or if we could locate an area in the body, if we were to point to an area, where am I experiencing anger or grief? That somatic felt sense experience can only be accomplished when we start to have a sense of our internal body awareness. So this is really beautiful when you start doing a yoga practice. So I want to share a little bit about what we can do as far as, and again, understanding what to expect in a yoga class if you're going to do one. But I think one of the things I like to share is that we have so much to choose from in our local area and even online for different types of yoga classes now. And again, not all yoga classes are trauma informed, but importantly, just to make sure that you understand the etiquette, what to expect, and knowing what to wear and what to bring. That's often something too that you will find out when you're going to a new yoga class. We at Firefly Hollow provide mats and blocks and straps. A lot of times yoga studios will do that, but also what to wear. I think that that's something that is up to each person, but in general, it's hard to do yoga in jeans, but very comfortable clothing is very supportive for that. So one other thing that I will share, if you are involved in any sort of yoga class, even if that yoga class is not trauma informed and the instructor is not trained in that, that's okay. Just please know that in any class, you have the freedom to choose. If there's a yoga pose you do not want to do, if you're not feeling comfortable with it, if your body's telling you don't do that, it's important to listen. And you always have the freedom to leave a class at any time. I've found that there's been multiple classes in my history of attending yoga that I actually left classes because of the way the instructor was not only talking to the students, but some of the things that the instructor was sharing about their personal lives, about their personal opinions and beliefs that I felt that were not inclusive, that were just quite frankly offensive. And I just thought, I'm going to leave. And I think the people pleaser in me earlier on would have not done so, but later on in my development, I realized this is something that's not healthy for me, and I don't really choose to support that. And it's not mattering if that person takes it personally as an instructor. I just got up and left. So just please know that you always have the choice and the freedom to do that. So we talk about yoga being more than just a practice of physical health or physical fitness. There are 8 limbs of yoga. So yoga in general is an entire lifestyle that is geared to support you in getting your body ready for meditation. And the different limbs of yoga, we'll talk about them briefly here, will support this lifestyle because in general, yoga is a path to enlightenment, to that sense of inner peace. And I think that there's many paths to this, and yoga is just one of them. And in our culture where we are not connected to our bodies, we don't know our felt sense, we're not necessarily aware of what we need, and even the ability to calm our minds, meaning calming our nervous systems down enough so that our mind can be still. Through that meditation practice, we can then gain a deeper sense of self-awareness of who we are and connect to a sense of higher self beyond the identity, the ego self of who we believe we are to be, because that's where we have a lot of suffering. We think we're supposed to be this, or we have a standard for ourselves that we've set. And through these practices of discharging the stress, calming the body down, through meditation and breath work and mindfulness, and even the disciplines that are involved in the 8 limbs of yoga, we can create a space, a sacred space for us to connect with that part of ourselves that's beyond who we think we are. And that's the gift of yoga that is not always talked about in just the westernized yoga culture that is very much physical fitness based. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. If you need to get fit and you want to do physical fitness based yoga, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. But I find it's really interesting, more so recently, I found more and more students are hungry and they're seeking for a deeper connection to themselves and are open to more of the spiritual practices that are involved in yoga. So briefly, the 8 limbs of yoga include the yamas. These are the moral disciplines that are involved in yoga. The niyamas is self-discipline. So this is more internal discipline. The yamas, it's the external discipline, more so how you are in the world. The niyamas is how you are with yourself. The 3rd limb of yoga is the asanas, which are the postures. These are the things that we're more familiar with. Pranayama is something you might have heard of, and that is breath work or breath control. Breath work is making a comeback. It is becoming a pop culture term, and I find it interesting because there are practices that are just breath work. But if you are taking a class with yoga that includes pranayama, you're going to get that breath work involved in the class and learn different techniques that you can use throughout your day, throughout your life to help activate your nervous system when you need to get more, ready to go and to help calm it down under high stress. So that's really powerful. Pratyahara is the withdrawal of the senses. So we're kind of disconnecting from this third dimensional sense of five sense world and expanding ourselves in that practice. The dharana is concentration. Dhyana is meditation. And the final one is samadhi. So we're leading, all of these 8 limbs of yoga are said to lead to this sense of inner peace, enlightenment, and contentment. So trauma-informed yoga really does emphasize the asana, which is the movement, the breath work, and it helps students reconnect with their bodies and emotions. So let's talk briefly about the different styles of yoga and give you an idea of maybe what type of yoga might be best for you. Vinyasa yoga. This is a fast-paced, breath-focused, flowing yoga. So when you move into a posture and maybe expand, you're inhaling, and as you flow with that posture and maybe you're leaning forward or moving into a different part of the posture, you're exhaling. And this is good for people who want physical movement. They want to get that flow. If you're sitting at a desk all day, this is great. You're getting more breath into the body, more oxygen, and this can help with mental focus. Ashtanga yoga is structured. So this is physically very demanding. It is the same set of postures in a sequence that is very disciplined. So I feel like if you're someone that wants to increase your discipline, that is a very good yoga you can try. Hatha yoga is one of my favorite types of yoga. So it's slower paced. It's similar to vinyasa where we're working on the foundational poses, but it's good for beginners and it's good for mindfulness because we're using breath, but in each of the postures, we may extend that breath for a sequence of 3 breaths, inhaling and exhaling, and then move to the other part of the posture. So Hatha yoga is a really great one for beginners. We offer that at Firefly Hollow with our lovely Miss Mimi. And then we have yin yoga. This is one I feel that is so powerful for getting into a meditative state. This is where we're holding postures for maybe extended periods of time. This is really helpful for deep relaxation. And in general, I want to just take a note here. Yin yoga and many yoga in general, anytime you're doing any sort of body work or moving your body, there can be an experience of an emotional release. So if you've held on to a particular muscle group for a long time, it's really tight and congested, and you finally get blood flow, energy flow, you're stretching that area and you get some circulation in that area, you can have this response in the body that you might feel an emotion come up. And that's really normal. In a trauma-informed practice, the instructor will also inform you of that being a possibility. One of the yin yoga classes that I was participating in, I entered into the class and I knew from the class, one of the students was one of my clients, and I knew that they had experienced some sexual trauma in their life. And the instructor didn't actually inform at the beginning of the practice of what an emotional release looks like. It's not something that's super, super common. It can happen. So I don't want you to, shy away from doing a yoga class because fear you're going to break down or have an experience, but it's just something to be aware of. That's really normal. And I think that this practice was challenging for me because I saw we were doing some hip opening moves where we're opening our legs and stretching the inner thighs, the adductors, and those muscles. Of course, if you have had any sort of sexual trauma, you can see how that might be related to in the unconscious memory, or just the activation of those muscles and stretching them can actually release a response. And this one student, she actually had, within maybe 45 seconds, she just started weeping and she got up to leave the room. And luckily I knew what was going on because I was observing, and I went out and I connected with her and consoled her. And I think that's something that I want to share, especially if you're doing some of the slower based practices, because when you're moving fast, you may not have time to think about what you're feeling, right? And that's why I feel that hatha and yin and restorative yoga, these slower practices, I think are really good for going inward and having that space and time to connect with your body. So just so you know, that's something that could be happening for some people if we're going through yoga. Restorative yoga is more gentle. It uses props, and it is very helpful for supporting the body so that when you're in a pose, you don't have to hold yourself up. This is like you're working with bolsters and you're lying in different poses that are completely surrounding your body and helping you to release without having to engage your body. And I think that that's really good for a deeper relaxation. Hot yoga is usually also called Bikram yoga. It's very physically intense. It's done in a 105-degree room, and it helps support detoxification. So if you're someone that's going through a detox protocol and you want to sweat, that healthy, good feeling sweat, and you're able to do an intense workout, you don't have any heart issues. Again, when you go to a studio that offers hot yoga, they'll tell you the contraindications, but that's one that can be very helpful. I will share my experience of my hot yoga class, though. I took multiple hot yoga classes in the past, but the one I took was a Bikram class. And at the time, I wasn't informed about trauma-informed practices. And the instructor was talking about, we were doing a pose called camel pose. So imagine you're on your knees, your hands are gripping your ankles, and you're leaning back. You tilt your head back and you open up your chest, right? So we're in a 105-degree room. We've already been practicing for 20 minutes in this sequence. And I, of course, was thirsty. I was feeling a little bit dizzy. And what the instructor said, she said, "Don't worry if you get dizzy. It's just your heart chakra opening up." Immediately, me as an energy medicine practitioner, as a medium who understands that and feels that and really relates to that somatically in my body, as a subtle energy field is kind of my expertise, I immediately was triggered. I was so triggered. I was like, wait a minute, excuse me. Yes, we can have a heart opening and it can feel like an opening in the chest. It can feel lovely. You can experience all different types of releases with that. But if you're feeling dizzy, that to me was a call to potentially confuse students who maybe needed to take a break, who instead of pushing through, because she was saying, just push through it, right? This Western culture, you got to push, it's got to hurt. That was really triggering to me. And the way that Bikram class was done, it was almost like I was being yelled at by a drill sergeant. Let's move into the next pose. And it was very demanding. So it wasn't trauma informed in the language, and it was very vigorous and stressful. It was so stressful to listen to her voice. And I ended up never going back to that yoga studio, unfortunately. So Yoga Nidra is another yoga. It is a form of guided meditation. So when I first did my first Yoga Nidra class, I was like, okay, I thought we're going to do some poses. It was something that we were really more lying there in a comfortable position. And the guided meditation portion of that was so beautiful, because if your mind wanders, the instructors for Yoga Nidra are trained that they can, at a steady pace, keeping your mind occupied with a guided meditation that has visual and sensory focal points to keep you on track with that meditation so you can go deeper into yourself. And there's relaxing music playing. It's also called yogic sleep, and it's a really great form of guided meditation in a group setting if you are someone that has a hard time meditating by yourself. Aerial yoga is one of my favorite types of yoga. I love the local studio here called Artemis, that's in Red Lion. They have aerial yoga, and it's really good for strength building. And they use a hammock or silks that you get to use to assist in different types of poses. For me, I can go a lot deeper into the poses, and it helps me with inversions because I'm not always good at going upside down. And it's really helpful because you get to swing around and move. I love the Shavasana in aerial yoga because you're lying in the hammock at the end, stretched out, and you're rocking slightly left and right. And it's just so nourishing and restorative. Now, for those of you out there, I'm going to take a segue here quickly. If you are someone that's hyper flexible or hyper mobile, now, how do you know if you do that? You want to notice if you hyperextend your legs or your arms. There should be a nice gentle bend in your knees and your elbows. And that's something that if you are hypermobile, you might be someone that easily dislocates your shoulder, maybe injures your knees or your joints, your ankles. And for me, I didn't know until later on in my yoga practice. I just thought I was super bendy and super great at yoga and flexible. We talked about this in Yogi Aaron podcast, right? That if you are someone that's hypermobile, that's something to be aware of when you do yoga. We want to make sure that you're creating a slight bend. You're not overextending or hyperextending your knees or your arms. And so with aerial yoga, that's one thing if you are hyper flexible, just to be mindful of so that you don't overextend. So that's one thing that I had to be mindful of in that practice. Another yoga that I love is Iyengar yoga. It's It's one of the greatest yogas for me as a disciplined person because I was wanting to be specific. It's precision focused. It's a style that emphasizes the alignment and the posture. It does use props like blocks and straps and even chairs to assist you in holding the poses. And people begin to practice Iyengar to build their strength and their balance and a detailed sense of body awareness. So at that time, I was still in my route to go to be a chiropractor, and I wanted the alignment. I wanted the postural alignment. I wanted to be in a physically pristine or precise alignment with each of my poses. So I took one of these classes in college too, and I remember the students were like, "Oh my gosh, they were really not happy with the instructor because they felt like she was too precise. This is too stressful." And for someone who's never done yoga, and that's their first experience of yoga, they may never try it again because it's very strict and more rigid because they're wanting you to be proper in the alignment. And this is really helpful if you had alignment issues or structural issues to get you back in alignment, to make sure you're doing your downward dogs perfectly, you're tilting your pelvis the right way, you're making sure you're not overextending your joints. And for me, being hyperbendy, this was really helpful for me. But if someone like yourself, if you don't like that really strict, rigid type of practice, Iyengar may not be for you. But that's one of my favorite practices. Now, the other one that you might have heard of is chair yoga. So this is a yoga that's really good to do on a chair. It's good for anyone that has issues maybe with mobility, or they're elderly, or if they're just beginners. And my mom loves chair yoga. She swears by it. I can also use chair yoga in my practice for Kundalini yoga, but I find it something that's really gentle and supportive. And if you learn chair yoga, even if you're not someone that has mobility issues or accessible issues with getting down on the floor, you can use chair yoga practices to support yourself in maybe midday, take a lunch break, and at your desk, do some chair yoga to get some of that movement in your body and help yourself with stiffness. So that's one of my favorite yogas. So my favorite yoga in general is Kundalini yoga. This is a practice that incorporates breath work, mudra, which are hand positions and positions the body is connecting to itself, and working with the mantras, which is chanting. And I found that when I discovered Kundalini and took my first class, it was something that I felt invigorated afterwards. I felt a sense of expansion in my nervous system and my energy. And for someone who's very energy-based, being an energy-sensitive person, being a medium, finding this clarity in feeling my aura get bigger, get clearer. And for me, that's a really big deal. I noticed that I was clearer mentally. I had flexibility still, but because the practice involves sets of postures or movements that are repetitive. So instead of me having to figure out in this vinyasa flow, where are we going next and having to keep up, when you learn a Kundalini yoga posture, you're going to be doing the same posture, the same repetitive movement, activating muscles, releasing them, activating, releasing, over and over again for 3, 6, 9, or 11 minutes or more, depending on how developed you are in your practice. And I love that because most of Kundalini yoga is not only repetitive movements, but it's done with the eyes closed down. This really starts to bring a lot more awareness to the body. And for me, embodiment practices have changed my life. So incorporating the repetitive movement with the breath work, and working with engaging the spine, because thinking about it, the spine is what encases our spinal cord, which is our central nervous system. And our central nervous system is so tied to our stress response, our muscles. It really runs the whole show. It's the connection from the brain to the rest of the body. So if we're activating and strengthening the spine and all the areas along the spine, we're working with enhancing that nervous system flow. And in Kundalini practice, we do work with the chakra system or the subtle energy body. We work with visualization and breath work to activate those spaces within the body and within the nervous system and energy field. And I love that because for personal development and for spiritual development, if we're able to calm down the mind through repetitive practices, through breath work, through discharging stress from the body, we can start to get in touch with a sense of the self, a sense of self beyond, oh, I am a mother, or I work here, or this is what my financial situation is, all these stories we tell ourselves. And through Kundalini, it's been so powerful in learning to downregulate my system And using breath practices such as the breath of fire, which is a practice in many yogas, but also in Kundalini, I can bring myself up online if I'm feeling tired or if I need to get back into a space of activity or mental focus. The other thing I find really powerful about breath of fire practice is it is a specific breath work that you're working with strengthening the diaphragm or diaphragmatic breathing. Most of us don't know that when we are shallowly breathing, so through the upper chest only, that is triggering to the nervous system that we are in fight or flight. We shallowly breathe when we're stressed. That's why if something happens that surprises us, we take a deep breath in and we gasp, go, that gasping is that short breath. It's short. And through deepening the breath, when we're relaxed, naturally, through the belly, we're telling our nervous system, almost like a hack, to calm down. And so through practicing breath of fire and many of the other breath work included in Kundalini, we are then activating the parasympathetic nervous system, getting ourselves in this rest and digest state. And if you can learn this and practice this, you can start to see when you start to get stressed, activated, and learn to use these practices so that you can be a better partner, a better mother, a better parent, and actually not get keyed up and maybe either fight, flight, fawn, or freeze, whatever you do that can create relationship issues, or even we can sabotage ourselves. So I really enjoy that about Kundalini. I feel like also what happened for me in Kundalini practices, there's been a practice for everything. So there's a practice for releasing grief, for anger, for detoxing the organs. And specifically because of my training in Chinese medicine and working with the meridian system. The meridians are the energy channels that flow through the body, that flow through our connective tissue, through our muscle tissue. And it's an extension of the nervous system. So what I like to do in my practice for Kundalini is talk about what are we doing? What movement are we doing? We're activating and releasing this area that's stimulating and clearing out these meridian channels. Similar to if you're getting Reiki or if an acupuncturist is working with an energy channel that may be overactive or underactive, that's what they're doing. Like I say, acupuncturists and energy workers are like the electricians of the body. Massage therapists work with the muscles, chiropractors work with the spine. So you can actually work with the meridian channels with the prana, we call it in yoga. The chi is in Eastern traditions. And we have different words for it, but we can work with clearing that. And that's really powerful when it comes to discharging stress and even getting rid of and releasing emotions like grief, sadness, anger, any of that stuff, and anxiety. These are really powerful practices to support that. But that spiritual practice of Kundalini, I think, is the thing that really, really supports my journey. And I love that we incorporate chanting, because if you're someone that can't meditate, you have a really loud inner dialogue, chanting, saying phrases over and over again out loud, focusing on your voice, on the sound of expression instead of that internal monologue can distract you from that inner monologue, and you can become more present. It can help clear the mind. And also if you're someone that has had experiences in being shut down in your own expression, vocalizing, or even maybe some self-criticism about your voice, what it sounds like, it's a beautiful practice to just go into that if you feel comfortable and just listen to the sound of your voice. Allow it to carry you into a nice, gentle, altered, relaxed state of consciousness. And it's in these relaxed states of consciousness that we allow the lower brain, the reptilian brain, the fight or flight response of the brain to downregulate, to calm down. And then the higher levels of the brain, the neocortex, so it's the newer brain in our mammal, it's a newer brain that's up there and developed since we've evolved as humans. We are able to then connect with that. This is where creativity comes in. This is where innovation, intuition, wisdom, this connection to something that's beyond ourself. We can't have spiritual experiences without activating or connecting with that. And so the practices of breath work, movement and the asanas, and even mudra can really help with that. And I specifically talk about mudras in the practice related to some of the acupressure points, because when you're stimulating different parts of the body, so say, for example, you're putting the thumb and the index finger together, through Kundalini practice, we're working on raising the Kundalini, which is said to be the life force energy. This is their nervous system energy, if you don't like that word life force. We're extending it and expanding it. Through the repetitive movement and breath work, what's fascinating is people will start to feel a subtle vibration, heat, pulsing, maybe a magnetic sensation between their fingertips when they're touching different parts of the body. And so they're really starting to activate and sense something beyond the physical form. It's really our extension of our nervous system. And this is what I do in our practice for Kundalini is bring that awareness to that part of the self, because that's an extension of the intuition. It's that sense of scanning a room with your nervous system, maybe with your five senses, but being able to close your eyes and sense the subtle shifts in the room, the emotions in the room. And that you can really then come into a practice, an environment, a relationship, more self-aware and more aware of other. And when you're more aware of other, you're able to show up in a deeper place of compassion, empathy, love, patience, all of that. And I think it's through this expansion of the inner awareness that extends the outer awareness that we can then move towards that sense of samadhi or enlightenment, whatever you'd like to call it. So what I do at the practice, especially being trauma informed, is every beginning and end of practice, we scan the body. I do a felt sense scan. How are we feeling physically? Notice anywhere in the body where you might be feeling tight, congested. Maybe you're feeling good. And we observe this all with non-judgment of ourselves. We label on a scale of 1 to 10 where we're feeling congestion, where we're feeling something, and just notice it so that at the end of the practice, we can see if it changes. Again, this brings a greater sense of self-awareness and embodiment. The next thing is we'll scan the mental body. So this is when your mental body is like this sense of your thoughts, clarity, mental fogginess, if your brain's racing, just noticing that, we look at that, and we scan the emotional body. Are we feeling anything and sensing it in an area of the body? If we had to locate it, is it in our knee? Whatever it is, we give it a label, we scale it on intensity level 1 to 10, and just notice. And then the final area, because Kundalini is there to activate that natural life force, the prana, the Kundalini from the base of the spine up, we're working with awareness of the subtle energy field. You could call it the aura, but I say it's the extension of the nervous system. It's that part of the self that if you're in a room and someone's staring a hole in your back, you sense it. You know that someone's looking at you. That phenomenon is this reality that we have a sense that's beyond just physical touching physical objects and things, that we can scan this environment. And if we're able to be aware of our own energy, our own auric field, and this is through all different practices of yoga, not just Kundalini, but that extension specifically through Kundalini practice, we're bringing awareness of it. We can then become aware of when we're out of balance. Maybe where we're feeling heaviness or a sense of congestion or even lightness. So we can notice what types of things, food, people, practices in our lives make our aura heavier, make it lighter, make it brighter. Because I found that as a clairvoyant, seeing people who practice Kundalini yoga, not just Kundalini yoga, there's many different practices that do this, but people who do practices like this to strengthen their auric field, their subtle body, get their balance in their energy systems, they're more vibrant, they're healthier, their immune systems are much more regulated, and they're actually able to be more in tune with their life purpose, sense of meaning, this intuition, being guided. And this is what I am passionate about, of course. You can still do Kundalini yoga just for exercise, but I really love the extension of this into the spiritual aspect and nature of who we are, because we're really not just one thing. We are mind, body, and spirit. We are physical beings having a spiritual experience. So the one other thing I would say that I love about the practice is when we are doing mudra and different types of positions that are putting pressure on different pressure points, like I said, we're able to clear some of this energy channel stuff. And when that happens, this is when we have these emotional releases. I just did a grief practice because I had some loss in my life recently. And I did the Kundalini grief practice. There's protocols for that. And it was something I didn't have much expectations for. But during the practice, I was feeling this emotion rise up. And I started to just have this beautiful cry, a release. And it was just so beautiful. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't necessarily something I thought it would be, but it was just so cathartic and like clearing. And I felt so clear afterwards. The other time, I've had multiple experiences with emotional release with Kundalini, more so than any other practices. And that's just for me. You may have it with any type of practice. But I really, really enjoyed just experiencing the different types of releases. There's a yoga kriya, which is a set of postures in Kundalini, the kriya. I did a set of postures for releasing any sense of self-hatred and embracing self-love. And I could say that just that practice, it includes breath work. It includes repetitive movement and holds at the positions. And it includes visualization. Again, I said our eyes are closed down a lot of times with Kundalini yoga. And it really did create this sense of expansion in my body and release. And again, that's why I'm feeling called to that, as you hear me talking mostly about Kundalini, but Kundalini practice is my favorite. There is so many different types of yoga, and Kundalini may not be a style for you. I would say keep in touch here and stay tuned if you are interested in Kundalini yoga. Actually, in the new year, 2025, I will be offering Kundalini yoga online and online courses for that. So keep in mind, if you are interested in that, to check out on our online community, because that will be coming soon. Because I think in general, any type of yoga that can help you with your own self-awareness, with helping you with your chronic stress or heal trauma through that body awareness piece and learning how to manage your emotions, it's just really priceless at this time. And I think the other factor is we have this disconnection in our society. There's the epidemic of loneliness. And when you come into a space where everyone is practicing a specific sequence of poses and you're connecting with people throughout the class, before or after the class, specifically with the same intention of self-development, self-awareness, first personal fitness, there's something really magical and beautiful that helps our nervous system naturally calm down when we have that sense of connection and belonging. And that's why I feel so passionate about trauma-informed yoga and trauma-informed care, is because facilitators are setting up environments where we can feel safe. We can feel safer, at least, and feel a sense of belonging. And that sense of belonging is hardwired to how our nervous system reacts. We can do a lot of work by ourselves, but sometimes it's not until we get into a community that feels safe, or we still feel a sense of belonging, that we can actually allow the hardwiring of our brain to let itself calm, and that we can then start creating deeper healing in our traumas, our stress, our mental health, or even our physical bodies. Because if we're holding on to a lot of stress, we can actually manifest pain in the body for that. So in general, I appreciate you guys listening to this episode. I'm always open to your questions. Please send them to us. We love to hear them. I think that exploring trauma-informed yoga and practices can be very helpful. And if you are interested, or anyone in trying this type of practice, definitely seek out a certified trauma-informed instructor near you. You can check that out just by Google searching it, and make sure that, again, even if they are trauma-informed, if it doesn't feel right in your body, if it's not a match for you, listen to it, because you are your own best source of wisdom. Always listen to that. So thank you guys so much for listening. And again, be well until next time, my friends. Thank you for listening to the Mind Body Detox Podcast. If you love this podcast, share it with others and leave us a review. Your reviews help us more than you know, and supports us continuing to make episodes and being heard from all over the world. You can also follow the link in our show notes to submit a topic that you would like to hear on the show.